Hey guys, this is another quick one just before the weekend, right? I want to keep this one really short. In the grand scheme of things, look, right, I've posted the last 2 days a video following the Euro technique. And one of the things that I want to highlight, right, is I know a lot of people, especially if you're newer to this, a lot of you guys struggle with that kind of mindset in terms of not being in a trade. And I think that's the real, I guess, the difference between that experience and it still being kind of new and fresh. It's almost the gamification that a lot of you guys are looking for right now. Obviously, I've done a lot of posts on Bitcoin. I've talked a lot about Bitcoin, but in the grand scheme of things, right, I really want to put this kind of focus and emphasis onto something like Euro to kind of show that there's something else more than I guess just one instrument to trade with, right? And this is where a lot of my bread and butter is made. This is 25 years worth of experience coming into play, and it just makes it kind of easy to make money, right? So what I want to do is just kind of highlight. I'll put the video in right in terms of the first video that I talked about. What was that? I think that was Wednesday. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of emphasize back in terms of how quick you can go through some of these things, right? So starting off, what I talked about was a daily time frame, right? We're going to look at a daily time frame, and what we want to see is just roughly what we kind of looking at bigger picture, right? Now, obviously, I can look down here and say, oh well, that's miles away. We can come up, we can see ultimately the move, right? We had a kind of a change of character there, right? From a bigger move. We failed obviously to make a new high there. We come down and kind of kept the move, right? So in theory, we can quickly see that until we started changing to the upside, which technically is here, right? We were in kind of a pullback move there, right? So overall general bias is kind of up, right? And that's kind of, as quick as I'm looking at this, right? This is kind of how I would review this, in seconds when I'm looking at the chart. And obviously, once I've got the data from the day, the week, the month, not really that much changes. So when you're down on the smaller time frames, like a 15-minute, even a 5 minute, if you really want, the bias then can become kind of second nature. And this is kind of the point, right? So what I'm looking at this now is in the grand scheme of things, I can say, well, from this particular move, we knew that we moved up. We actually had a decent kind of move here. We had a push above the new high. We had a smaller move down, which ultimately leads to a higher low, higher high, right? Then we had this one here, right? This one's kind of interesting here because it's a very, very small pullback, right? We didn't really come into the range. We've obviously got kind of a gap sitting in there, right? So a lot of things that we can kind of notice on the back of that one move, right? So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to mark this level up as just a kind of an area of interest, right? Now, I'm still out in the daily. I'm still looking kind of, what's going on, bigger picture. What I can then see is from this particular move, we had this kind of massive drive, and this drive actually took us beyond this prior swing high, right? So this becomes an awful lot more interesting, kind of bigger picture. Now, at this particular point, right, you're looking at this saying, are we kind of looking to continue on up in the grand scheme of things? Now, we know that we've got some liquidity down and around this area. I'm not going to go into things like the supply and the demand levels and so on. This is just, just kind of breaking it down to keep, I guess, the mechanical structure of this, right? This is something that you can kind of copy over and over and over and over again, right? So in the grand scheme of things, right, if you want to start to trade this and to make money out of doing stuff like this, right, the next step you need to look at is to say, well, okay, what is my bias, right? We've just found and identified an area of liquidity, right? That's not the hard part, right? Knowing the levels is almost the easy bit, right? Now, next thing is we ultimately swing up, we come back down, right? We've got this particular low, which obviously is another area of interest, right? So I could put just a note in here, um, you know, area of interest, right? And I'm just going to keep it as simple as this in terms of what I want to see for now, right? So we know we got liquidity, we know we got an area of interest. So the main kind of thing for me is if we were to close tonight underneath this level, right, the chances are we've actually got this change of character to the downside, right? We ultimately failed to take these highs out. right? And therefore, I've got a pretty good range and seeing this as a potential sweep, right? So this is one thing. Now, I'll come into a smaller time frame in a second, right? I just want to kind of highlight what I've done in, hopefully minutes, right? For me, when I'm doing this, without filming it, without recording this is seconds. This is like 30 seconds worth of analysis, right? Now, what I can look at is, well, clear as day, got this indicator on, right? This is just to show people, what I'm seeing. This is obviously a sweep. We've got a gap sitting in there. We've got a master pattern kind of area all the way down here, right? So this could easily be a magnetic zone, a lot of liquidity there, right? Now, given that we'd be expecting, even in the worst case scenario, we'd be expecting a pullback. If this was to close here and we come down on Monday, for example, I'd expect Tuesday to start, pulling something like this in, right? So, although I would have loved to have seen this move happen today, and I would have loved to have seen, this holding in the grand scheme of things to move up, right? It just means that by following this kind of technique, this kind of bias as a whole, when you are wrong and when you are expecting something to happen, when it doesn't happen, we had no change of character to the upside, right? So in the video I done on Wednesday, I talked about the move and I was looking for this. And as you can see here, from yesterday's move, still saying, look, I want that confirmation, right? This would have been the optimal entry, the optimum trade, and they just never come, right? So when I zoom into the smaller time frames, you're going to see that it just never happens, never really kind of plays itself out. So what I'm looking for is after this real big drop after the sweep, right? We've taken liquidity on one side. The question is, are we going to come down all the way, right, before ultimately having a pullback? Now, I don't really care in which way this happens. I just care that in some regard it does happen, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mark out this level as a master pattern. It's going to turn this to orange, right? This is kind of an area of interest for me on the charts. Turn this back off, and then ultimately drop down to the 4 hour. I'm going to look at the 4 hour assessment and say to myself, well, these are all, I know full well, these are all on that kind of daily, daily time frame, right? Because I've marked everything up on the daily time frame. So these are my kind of areas of interest. These are the areas that I'm definitely keen to explore. What I want to look for now is what's actually happening in this, this range, right? Well, first things first, I can see that we've got the last sell before you buy candle sitting there, right? I can drag that across and say, yeah, we are pretty much definitely inside that. So what I'd like to see is the confirmation on the smaller time frames again. I've done this yesterday on a video. Is, in an ideal world, we want to see something, right, that kind of gives us a move similar to this, right? It doesn't have to be this move. It doesn't have to be, exact. And I'm not looking to say, oh, when it hits this level, I'm buying. I'm looking to work with the charts, right? And again, I think this is part of the gamification that a lot of new traders get wrong, right? They want to press buttons. They want to be in a trade. They think if they're not trading, they're not making money. In the grand scheme of things, right? This is really how you make money, right? This is where, again, this, I'm saying experience comes in, right? Is you were better making money when you were off the chart, out of a trade, right? You're saving your capital for almost the optimal entry, right? So if we get some kind of change of character sitting in you, I'm happy to start looking for longs. We've had this kind of hyper extension. We know we need a pullback even just to this range, right? So to give you kind of an idea in terms of a situation like this, right? If I was to say, let's just go long in terms of where it is right now, I was to put a stop loss just below this particular low there, and I aim just at the bottom, right, of that. We're still looking at a 3.75% trade, right? I could probably squeeze a bit more out of that if I was a bit more aggressive, right? But these are the types of entries that you could take, all day long, right? Now, if you only get one of these in a week, you only get one of these, in a fortnight. It doesn't really matter. And this is where the prop firm stuff comes in, right? This is where having a bigger account obviously benefits you. In the grand scheme of things, if you look at this and you say to yourself, right, you're trading $100,000, right? This is a $3,750 trade, as I've set it up like this, right? If you're trading a $200,000 account, right, you just double it. So you can see that if you've done this in a single week, it's not the end of the world, right? When you start trading 500,000, $1 million in your personal account, these numbers are ridiculous, right? This is a $30,000 trade in $1 million account, right? So when you start looking at the numbers, you start looking at what it is. I'm not I'm not concerned about not getting in, right? And this is the real, real kind of bread and butter, right? So what I'm going to do now is just to finish off with, I want to come down to this 15-minute time frame, and I want to say to myself exactly the same thing, right? We didn't have confirmation on the move as of yesterday. What am I looking for in terms of confirmation on the move as of today? Well, exactly the same thing. The only difference being is we had non-farm, right? And it looks like currently we have a pullback move right now. The video yesterday or the day before, I talked about kind of the gut instinct of a move kind of going up. It didn't seem impulsive, it didn't seem ready. This is kind of similar, right? This doesn't really give me a warm fuzzy feeling that we're about to kind of skyrocket up. It is obviously kind of moving up, but it's that slow grind which is ultimately the problem, right? So I'm kind of not anticipating this yet. I'm not going to get into anything today now, right? This is basically a move up. We might come back down. It'll be on the break of this move, if anything, right? Or we might end up seeing, this move back, a double top type of move, and then ultimately a continuation on down, right? So this is the kind of thing that I'm going to be monitoring now as of Monday, right? And then I'll obviously kind of keep talking through this particular setup until I actually enter the trade and then kind of pull the trigger, right? So anyway, have a great weekend. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you on the next stream. Cheers up.